we're going to make a challah. The ingredients are 1/10 of a pound of yeast, and I get the cake yeast, which is on the top right, and I divide it into 10, and I package it up in wax paper or saran and freeze it, and then take it out when I need it. To make the yeast, to proof the yeast, I make a well, half a cup of flour, half a cup of warm water, and a teaspoon of sugar. Okay, I'm going to take 1/10 of a pound of yeast. You can also use 2 tablespoons of granulated yeast. You have to find the right amount of yeast for your bread. I think granulated turns out to be about 2 tablespoons, or 2 packages. I'm going to mix the sugar, teaspoon of sugar, into half a cup of water, warm water, not too hot. And I'm going to pour it onto the yeast. Now put that in a warm place, maybe an oven that has been slightly warmed with the door ajar, and leave it for 10 to 15 minutes until the yeast is bubbly and creamy. Now that the yeast is frothy and bubbly, like it is here, nice and creamy looking, you're going to mix these ingredients: 3 eggs, half a cup of sugar, half a cup of warm water, 3/4 scant of vegetable oil, a tablespoon of salt, and you're going to add 2 more cups of flour to this mixture. So let's do that. I'm going to just whisk the eggs a bit before we go in. Like that. So it all mixes up. Then we're going to add half a cup of sugar. You can be mixing at this point, mix it into the yeast. Add a half a cup of warm water. Mix in that salt. Add the oil. I use canola, or you could use safflow, or corn oil, I suppose. Mix it up. Nice and smooth. Then add 2 more cups of flour. It'll be a total of 3 cups of flour there. And what we're going to do after the flour is added is let the mixture sit for about 15 minutes covered. And that allows the glutens to start working. And after that, you're going to be adding more flour to in the kneading process. And you're going to see that when you work with bread dough that has eggs in it, it has a beautiful smooth texture. It's quite lovely to work with. So just give this another mix, another few mixes. There, that should be good. And now just take a fork, scrape off the spoon. You don't want to lose anything. And I'll get a towel. We'll cover it up and let it sit for 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be in a warm place. Just let it sit in a neutral place for about 15 minutes, and we'll come back. And all right, the bread has sat for about 15 minutes, and you can see it's sort of gluey looking. And now we're going to add, I've got 2 cups of flour here. We'll add a total of about 3 for the kneading. Pour it out. And the kneading is the most important part, really. You have to be, for this kind of bread, it has to be vigorous. You have to be turning it and working the flour in, and that's how you produce a beautiful bread. And you turn it like this, and you fold it. You're always folding air in, folding more flour in, and keep spreading the flour so that it doesn't stick to your counter, like that. Use the heel of your hand, which is beautiful. Like I said, when you're working with the egg bread, the smoothness of the dough it's just really delightful. And do this for 10 minutes, and you'll see how you'll work in all the flour. The dough becomes thicker, and it becomes harder to knead, but the 10 minutes of working in the dough, spreading out the flour and working it in, is quite important. And using the heel of your hand works well. And you just keep rounding it, turning it into a ball, turning it over. Makes a big difference. After you've kneaded it for about 10 minutes, it should round up. It should just, as you knead it, you turn it into around, and it will just be around. And this you will put into a lightly oiled or greased bowl. Put the good side, so-called good side, down first. Roll it in the oil, so grease the top so that it doesn't dry out. And you'll put this into a warm spot, not too warm. You could either heat an oven up to about 100, 150 degrees, put it in the oven with the door ajar. It has to be covered either with a towel or with a piece of saran, and let that sit for about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours, until it's doubled, and then you'll punch it down. You can occasionally take it out, warm the oven up a bit, and put it back in, but don't let it be hot. You could put it in the sun, or if your kitchen's warm, you could just let it sit. Okay, you'll see that in about 2 hours it'll be doubled. Okay, I'm actually making two challahs, two koileches for this video, and they're both risen quite nicely. Every bread turns out differently, so I've left them the full 2 hours. I always leave them the full 2 hours. I find that good bread, you have to wait the amount of time that it takes. Don't rush it. So, you know, this next step is very easy. You just go, and kids love to do this. You just go like this, and puff out, punch it down, and roll it up. Now this, it's interesting. Each one of them feels quite different. You'll see. That one punched nicely. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be as nice as this one here. This one does. There we go. That's a real good punch. That doesn't mean that that won't turn out quite nicely too. But round it up again, cover it, and let it go for 1 hour, 45 minutes to an hour, and after that we'll be braiding it. Again, we'll put it in a lukewarm, sort of a gently warm setting, and the breads should be pretty well doubled again. Okay, this is after the second rising, and both breads have turned out quite nicely. So we're going to remove the covers, and we're going to punch them down for the final time. Feel okay. And that feels fine. And also this one feels fine. Okay. What we're going to do now is braid them. And you can braid them in 3 strands, 4 strands, 6 strands, whatever suits you. Now, it depends on your counter. You might lightly flour the board. Depends on your working surface. So I'm going to do a 4 braid this time. I'll divide it in half, and then I'll divide it in half, and I'll divide it in half, and sort of roll each one out. These are very springy because the 3 eggs inside. So they're very short and fat, plump. So line them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, sort of stick them together, and you go 2 over 3, 4 over 2, and 1, you're always stretching them, over 3. and it seems to produce a very fat, and you do that again, 1, 2, and 3. It produces a very fat loaf, and it all depends on how the dough is working that day, on the humidity, and I just roll it up, and you'll tuck in the ends, and you'll see we'll now put this onto a very well greased baking sheet and cover it and let it rise again for about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, and you should take no more than that, and you'll see how it turns out. So I'll just get the baking sheet, slip it on. I'm going to be baking 2 at a time. My oven's small, so I have to put it at the side. Just make sure your ends are tucked in, and it'll be ready to go fairly soon. We'll have to coat it with egg wash. Okay, now we're going to bake the challahs, but before we do, we have to put a nice egg wash on them. I'm making 2, so each one will have 1 egg yolk and plus 1 teaspoon of cold water, and we'll just put that, mix that up and put that on coat each bread with them. It's not necessary. The bread will just be a flat color, but if you want it to look shiny, this is a really nice touch. And you can keep the egg whites and do various things with them. You can whip them into an omelet you're making, and I often make meringues with them, a pavlova. If you have 4 and a cup of sugar, a little bit of vanilla, makes a pavlova, and it's delicious, a lovely light dessert. But
what is a pavlova?
A pavlova is a meringue named after the Australian, after the Russian ballerina, developed by an Australian chef in the 1900s on the occasion of her tour to Australia. So that's what it is. It's an Australian dessert. Anyway, the Koilech will be beautiful and shiny. If you just spread this out, see how it rose? This is a really nice bread to serve at any meal. It looks beautiful when it's served whole. It makes nice French toast if there's any left, which there often isn't, but you just get some stale. And it's really delicious in bread pudding when you make that with a caramel or a chocolate sauce. Fantastic. If you take this same recipe and put, say, 1 less egg in the original dough, you can make a really nice brioche. What you do is let it rise once, then divide the dough into 3, make 3 sort of circles, flat circles, roll them out into circles, put a tablespoon or 2 of jam in between each one, let it rise, and then cut it into spokes and bake it. And you've got a great looking dessert. You can ice that if you like. It looks terrific. And people really like the taste. The bread is so soft. You can put cinnamon instead of jam. So you've got quite a lot of possibilities to do. This is a bread you make on a day when you're home for a few hours. You cannot rush this bread, but when it's done, you'll be very satisfied. I have very limited oven space, so in order to bake 2 at a time, I have to use a small pan and sort of jimmy them in, but it works. If it browns too quickly, you can cover the breads with some foil or brown paper inside the oven while you're baking them. And this will go into a preheated 400-degree oven for 30 minutes. You can judge that according to your own oven. The breads have come out of the oven now. They're beautiful and brown and golden. They're delicious smelling, great smell. And they'll taste good too. It should have a hollow sound on the bottom if you tap it, but 30 minutes at 400 degrees, maybe a little longer if you turn the heat off. You might have to cover it, but that's going to have a great crumb. It's going to have a cake-like consistency. Great with butter, honey, jam. Great as toast. You can use it in a brioche, French toast, delicious. Enjoy.